Prior to the scientific revolution, unexplained tragedies needed an explanation. Magic was the only answer, and most were convinced that magic was connected to evil. In 1496, the Malleus Maleficarum, translated as The Hammer of Witches, was published in Germany. Written by Heinrich Kramer, it was the definitive text on witchcraft and witch hunting. For over a century, it was second only to the Bible as the most printed book. It outlined the reality of witchcraft, what it was, how they would try it in a court of law, and even sanctioned torture as a way to gain a confession. The Malleus Maleficarum is attributed to fueling mass hysteria across Europe and the American colonies for centuries to come, in which thousands upon thousands of people, mostly women, were accused of being witches and executed in the most gruesome ways.
Regarding the witchcraft hysteria in the Northeast in the 16 and 1700s, yes, Vermont actually did have a witch trial.
The Krieger witch trial was basically a tale that was passed down in Pownal through the ages. The only published account of it we have was written by T.E. Brownell. It was published in the Vermont Gazetteer, which was kind of a compilation of Vermont town histories that was published in the 1860s. And he basically tells the story that Widow Krieger, as he referred to her, we now know her name to be Margaret Krieger, at least the anglicized version of her name. It was Margaret Krieger. She was actually born Marguerite Schumacher and married what is often referred to as a Dutch squatter who ended up settling in Pownal in the 1740s before the English settled here in southern Vermont.
And they actually worked in a mill that the husband had built.
And so her husband, whose original name was Johann Uri Krieger, was basically squatting there in what's now North Pownal. He built a mill on the Hoosick River. And then in 1760, when the English were establishing townships here in what became Vermont, and Pownal was established in 1760, the town founders decided to award Johann Krieger a bit of land that his mill sat on, because of course any new settlement needs a mill. And so they gave him that mill. And he and his family, his wife Margaret, they had 3 children who ended up moving down to Williamstown, where Margaret was born. Johann, or John Gregor Krieger, which was his anglicized name, ended up dying in 1785.
And this left Mrs. Krieger a widow, and they used to call her Widow Krieger. Now, back in those times, women were not really supposed to own a lot of land.
In the 17th and 18th century, women who were unmarried were not allowed to own land. And so we can kind of make assumptions and read between the lines that these people wanted to take the land back, take the mill back to the benefit of the community. And T.E. Brownell says that a lot of people in town said that Margaret was an extraordinary woman. That's what she was accused of.
For some reason, they began to think that she was a witch. Why would they think that? Well, some of the crops began to fail. The cows would not milk. Some chickens were killed. Other animals would come up missing. And somehow, some way, they believed Widow Krieger was responsible.
And so Margaret Krieger, was accused of witchcraft. Brownell said that she was given 2 options. She was sent before a safety committee that said that they were going to try her by either having her climb a tree and have it cut down, and if she survived, she was a witch and would be treated as such.
The other way is called dunking, and what they used to do was dunk the person into a river. And if you floated, you were a witch. If you did not, you were not a witch. If you floated, what they thought was the devil was holding you up. However, if you floated and you lived, you were sure to be killed some other way, by hanging or something like that. And of course, if you didn't, you drowned.
And so, as Brownell told the story, they ended up choosing the water method of trial, which is a common way of Water dunking was a common way of trying witches in the 17th and 18th century. A lot of the photographs that we have of witch trials, some of this period, show them bound with rope.
They actually went down to the river. They cut a hole into the river, into the ice, and Mrs. Krieger went right to the bottom. Now, unfortunately, we do not know the amazing soul, the hero who jumped in and saved her. And of course, she had proven that she was not a witch.
So she was acquitted of witchcraft because she sank, she didn't float, but she was actually able to be saved and pulled out of the water. She lived another 5 years. She ended up moving back to Williamstown, where her son still lived and where she's buried today in West Lawn Cemetery.
And no one ever dared to call Widow Krieger a witch again.
The witch trials are seen as a black mark on history, a condemnation of thousands of innocent lives because of belief in superstitions or untruths. Today, we don't use the Malleus Maleficarum to fuel our accusatory fires, but we can easily find our own sources of false information to condemn those around us. This has been The Lore of the Shires. Stay tuned for our next episodes, where we cover the mysterious and dangerous Bennington Triangle and the haunted life of Shirley Jackson.